My name is Callum, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the afterthought in my own family. My younger brother, Ethan, was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the one whose every mistake was met with excuses while I was held to impossible standards. If Ethan forgot to do his homework, it was because he was creative and not meant to be boxed in by rules. If I forgot, I was lazy and irresponsible. If you needed money for something, my parents would hand it over without question. If I needed money, well, why wasn't I working harder? Why wasn't I more like Ethan? I suppose I should have seen it coming. The favoritism, the endless enabling, the way my parents spoke about Ethan as if he were destined for greatness while I was just there. But I didn't. Not fully. Not until I saw the will. It was a rainy Sunday afternoon, and I had stopped by my parents' house like I sometimes did. Not because I wanted to. I had long since accepted that I would never be their priority, but because, despite everything, I still felt an obligation to help them. Over the years, I had covered small expenses here and there, chipped in for repairs, and even helped with their mortgage when things got tight. Not often, but enough that I thought, foolishly, that they appreciated it. That, deep down, they understood I was the one keeping things afloat while Ethan bounced from one failed business venture to the next, burning through every dollar they handed him. I wasn't even looking for it. The will. I had gone into my dad's study to grab some documents for him. He had asked me to, probably because he didn't feel like getting up, and there it was, sitting on his desk. A stack of neatly typed papers with a bright yellow sticky note on top. Finalized will, do not misplace. Now, I don't consider myself a nosy person, but something about it made me pause. Maybe it was the fact that I had been hearing them talk about making things official for months. Maybe it was the way my mother had mentioned, in passing, that Ethan would be set for life. Or maybe, deep down, I just knew. I flipped through the pages, skimming until I found what I was looking for. Everything, the house, the savings, the investments, was going to Ethan. My name wasn't even mentioned. Not once. I stared at the paper for a long time, my stomach twisting. It wasn't even about the money. It was the principle. After everything I had done for them, after all the times I had stepped in when Ethan couldn't be bothered, I was still nothing to them. A backup plan at best, a source of extra income when they needed it. But never a son. Never an equal. I could hear my parents talking in the other room, laughing at something on TV. Completely unaware that, in that moment, something inside me had shifted. I put the will back exactly as I had found it, walked out of the study, and sat down on the couch as if nothing had happened. But in my mind, a decision was already forming. They had made it clear where I stood in their lives. Now, it was time for me to act accordingly. I sat there, pretending to zone out to the noise of the TV, but inside, my mind was racing. I could feel my pulse quicken as the weight of what I had just seen settled in. The lie was so obvious, so blatant, and yet I couldn't bring myself to confront them. Not yet. I wasn't ready to show my hand. I stayed on the couch for a while, silently watching my parents. They were in the middle of a conversation about some new show they were watching, completely unaware of the storm brewing in my mind. My mother, as always, was fussing over some small detail, her hands flitting around like she was orchestrating everything in the room, while my dad was slouched in his chair, half watching, half dozing. It was so typical, so painfully normal. But everything had changed. Finally, I cleared my throat. Hey, I was, just curious about something, I said, my voice sounding a little too casual even to my own ears. I had to play this cool. I couldn't let them sense anything. Both of them glanced over at me, as if they hadn't expected me to say anything. I could tell they were surprised I'd even spoken up. Maybe they thought I was just some background noise in their lives. What is it, Callum? My mom's tone was distracted, like I was interrupting her mental checklist for the week. I feigned nonchalance, leaning back a bit on the couch, trying to make it seem like the question didn't matter. I was just wondering, about the will. I'm pretty sure I overheard you two talking about it. My dad raised an eyebrow. What about the will? He sounded defensive, but then he quickly masked it with a lazy shrug. It's all set up. Everything's going to Ethan and you. Don't worry, son. He waved it off like it was no big deal. My mother, sensing that my dad was getting a little too flustered, jumped in. Oh, don't listen to your father. It's all equal, 50-50 between you and Ethan. She smiled at me, though I could see the slight tension in her face. We wanted to make sure everything's fair. We've been talking about it for months now. 50-50. Equal. The words hung in the air like a sickeningly sweet lie. My stomach twisted again, but I kept my face blank. Right? I said, nodding slowly, trying not to let my voice betray me. Just wanted to double check. Ethan had never been good with money. Everyone knew that, but my parents had always made excuses for him. It's just that Ethan is going through a rough patch, my dad would say. Or, Ethan's been trying to start his own business, and it hasn't taken off yet. He'll get it together, though. Meanwhile, I was the one who'd helped pay for their mortgage when they couldn't keep up, the one who'd picked up the slack when Ethan's business ventures went south. And now, here I was, watching them lie straight to my face. But I didn't call them out. Not yet. I wasn't going to let them know how much it hurt, how deeply the betrayal cut. No, I'd play along. Let them believe they could fool me. I wasn't ready to show my cards. Not until I had a plan. Good to know, I said, flashing a tight smile. I'll just, get going then. Things to do. I stood up from the couch and turned toward the door. Before I could leave, my mom called after me. Oh, Callum, just so you know, Ethan might need you to help with the bills a little more this month. He's really been struggling. I froze at the door, my hand on the handle, a bitter laugh bubbling up in my throat. Ethan struggling? That was rich. I turned around slowly, my eyes narrowing, but I didn't say a word. I just nodded. Of course. I'll talk to him later. And with that, I left. I had to get out of there before I said something I might regret. But I wasn't done. No, not by a long shot. This was far from over. As soon as I got home, I pulled out my phone, sat down, and stared at the screen. I could feel the anger building inside me, but I wasn't going to waste it. No, I needed to be patient. I needed to wait. And when the time was right, they'd see what it felt like to be left out. I just had to be careful, because this was going to get ugly. The next few days felt like a waiting game, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized just how far I'd been pushed. They thought they could use me, treat me like a safety net, all while pretending to care. But I was done. I had made up my mind. No more. I knew what I had to do. The first step was to cut the financial ties. It wasn't just the small stuff anymore. It wasn't just me paying for the occasional repair or sending a little extra money for groceries. This was bigger than that. It was time to cancel everything, every last little thing I'd been doing for them. So I started with the most obvious one, the mortgage. It wasn't much, but I had helped out a few times when they were behind. A couple of months, I'd chipped in a little here and there. Nothing major, just enough to make sure they didn't fall behind, enough to make sure they didn't have to ask for help. But now, they didn't need me. They had Ethan, the golden boy. I opened my bank app, stared at the screen for a moment, and then found the automatic payment I had set up for their mortgage. It had always felt like just another way I could be of use to them, but not anymore. I tapped the cancel button, just like that. The payment was gone. I hesitated for a split second, but then I thought about the will. The lies. The way they dismissed me, how they treated me like I was just there to fix their problems while they lavished attention on Ethan, the creative, one who never had to lift a finger. No more. The next step was the utilities. The electricity bill. The water. The gas. I had been covering some of that, too, when they were behind, as I was often the one they'd call when the bills piled up. Callum, could you help with this one? Just this month, they'd ask. And, like a fool, I'd say yes. No more. I pulled out the monthly payments and canceled everyone. It wasn't even about the money anymore. It was about sending a message. I didn't stop there. I thought about the car repairs I'd paid for when their old sedan started having issues, or the countless times I'd sent money when they needed a little extra for groceries, only for them to throw a lavish dinner party for their friends while I was left to scrape by. I went through my records and pulled up every transaction. Everything. If they thought Ethan was going to cover their expenses, then let him. When I finished, I just sat there for a moment, letting the gravity of it all sink in. There was no turning back now. They would have to face the consequences of their actions. Ethan could step up, or they could face the reality of what it meant to burn bridges. But it wasn't just about the money, it was about control. They thought they could manipulate me, make me the invisible one, the one who always had to be there, always had to help. Well, now they'd see what it felt like when that crutch was taken away. I went through the rest of the evening with a kind of calm, detached satisfaction. My parents hadn't even called. They hadn't noticed yet. Ethan probably hadn't noticed either. But they would. They would soon enough. A few days passed in silence, but then came the first message. It was my mom, texting me out of the blue, and it made my blood run cold. Callum, the mortgage is due. No greeting. No small talk. Just that simple demand. It was exactly like I thought it would be. But this time, I wasn't going to help. This time, I was done pretending that they could continue using me as a fallback. I took a deep breath. My fingers hovered over the screen. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. I could just pretend like I didn't get the message. But that wouldn't be satisfying enough. I wasn't going to just leave them hanging. Instead, I replied, I know. You should ask Ethan. I hit send, and then set my phone down on the table, watching it vibrate as if the universe was waiting for them to respond. I didn't care what they said. I didn't care how they tried to guilt-trip me, or what kind of excuses they'd come up with. This was it. They had crossed the line. Now, they would have to deal with the consequences of their own actions. But deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. What came next? Well, that was going to be even harder for them to ignore. The seconds felt like hours, the phone sitting on the table vibrating again and again. I waited for a response, but honestly, I knew what would come. They always had a way of twisting things, playing on my emotions, using every ounce of guilt to get me to do what they wanted. It was the same old song and dance. But this time, I wasn't going to fall for it. The phone buzzed again, this time with a message from my dad. The screen lit up with his name, and my heart sank just a little. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but it certainly wasn't this. Callum, what do you mean by that? This is your family. Why would you not help us? We've always been there for you. There it was. The manipulation. The attempt to make me feel like I was the one who had wronged them. But I had already made up my mind. I wasn't about to let them gaslight me into submission again. I sat there for a few moments, staring at the message, thinking about what I was about to do. There was no more pretending. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to confront them. I picked up my phone, fingers trembling just slightly, and replied, keeping my tone as calm and measured as possible. You want to know why? Because you lied to me. All this time, you've been treating me like a backup, like an ATM when it was convenient. You told me that everything was split evenly between me and Ethan, but you left everything to him in the will. That's the truth, isn't it? I waited, heart hammering in my chest as I watched the 3 dots flicker on my screen. They were typing. A moment later, my mom's name popped up, the words cold and distant. What are you talking about? The will isn't about that. It's not like that at all. We've always made sure things are fair between you two. I let out a quiet laugh, shaking my head, but I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing my frustration. I typed back calmly, I found it, Mom. The will. I read it. You left everything to Ethan. The reply came almost instantly, and I could feel the desperation in her words, even through the screen. That's not true, Callum. It's not what you think. You're making assumptions, and you're overreacting. We told you both that we wanted to make sure everything was taken care of. Ethan's been struggling, and we thought it would be better for him to have it. My jaw tightened. Struggling? Ethan was a grown man. He wasn't a child. I had watched him throw away opportunity after opportunity, and yet they always coddled him. I wasn't going to let them continue to insult my intelligence. You've always made excuses for him. You've always covered for him when he messed up, but when it comes to me, I'm just the one who helps pay the bills. I get it now. I don't mean as much to you. So if I don't, then fine. I'm done. I want nothing to do with this anymore. There was a long pause. For a moment, I thought they might finally realize that I wasn't playing their game anymore. But no. The next message from my dad proved I was far from the truth. Callum, you're being unreasonable. You know we love you. You always have a place here. You're a son, too. We didn't mean to make you feel like you're not important. It's just, Ethan needs more help right now. He's always been the one who struggles, and he's been working so hard to turn things around. I could feel my anger starting to boil over, but I forced myself to breathe slowly, taking a moment to collect my thoughts. I wasn't going to get dragged into their web of lies. I had seen through them, and now I was going to make sure they knew exactly why I was done. You really think I don't see through this? You think I didn't notice how Ethan never had to do anything? How I was always the one you came to when you needed something fixed? But when it came down to it, I was just the one who paid. The backup. My mom responded next, but her words had the same hollow tone. It was like she thought if she just kept repeating her excuses, I would eventually give in. You're making this all about money. It's not like that. The will was just a formality, Callum. It was just a decision we had to make. We didn't want to leave him with nothing. It's not like you don't have your own life. I could feel my blood boiling, but I stayed firm, keeping my tone steady. Don't act like this is some noble gesture. You didn't do this because you care. You did this because you think Ethan's entitled to everything while I'm just the one who takes care of the messes you make. You've been treating me like a backup plan for years. Well, I'm done. There was no response at first. I could hear the silence on the other end of the phone, like they were trying to come up with a new lie, a new excuse to pull me back in. But I wasn't going to fall for it. Finally, my dad texted again. "Callum, please. This is all a misunderstanding. You're our son. We didn't mean for it to be like this. We don't want to lose you." But it was too late for that. The truth had come out, and now there was no going back. I wasn't just going to be their safety net anymore. I wasn't going to pretend everything was fine while they built their lives around favoritism and lies. You already did. And I'm done. I hit send and stared at the screen, letting the weight of it all settle in. There was no coming back from this. And frankly, I didn't care. The days after I cut off all communication with them felt oddly calm. It was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, though I knew the storm wasn't over. I had to force myself not to think too much about it, not to wonder if they would come crawling back or try to guilt-trip me into helping again. For the first time in years, I was free from their manipulation. But then reality hit them hard. It started with a phone call from my mom. I ignored it. Then another. And another. Finally, after a week of no contact, I figured they were probably just getting desperate. I'd been getting the occasional text from my dad asking me to pick up the slack with bills, or some nonsense about how they were still family and needed my help. I didn't respond to any of it. They had made their choice, and I had made mine. I started to hear from people around town about how my parents and Ethan were handling things. Word gets around fast in a small town. Apparently, my dad had tried to apply for a second mortgage, but the bank turned them down, saying their debt-to-income ratio was too high. With no backup plan, and no steady stream of money coming in from me, my parents had no choice but to rely on Ethan, the golden child. It didn't take long for them to come crawling to him. Ethan, of course, didn't take responsibility for anything. He had always been good at taking the easy way out. I overheard from a neighbor that my parents had begged Ethan to help with the mortgage, claiming they couldn't keep the house without him. They said he needed to step up. I imagined how that conversation went. My parents, desperate, trying to appeal to his ego, asking him to come through when they needed him most. But Ethan, true to form, had a million excuses for why he couldn't help. I wasn't surprised. He was never the type to deal with consequences. I had always been the one to pick up the slack, the one to face the mess they created. One evening, I decided to check in on the situation. I wasn't sure if I was curious about what was happening or just wanted to see how they were handling the fallout. I called my parents' house, my thumb hovering over the screen. Would they still act like everything was fine? Or would they finally acknowledge the situation they created? My mom answered after 2 rings. There was a noticeable coldness in her voice. "Callum, what's going on?" she asked, as though everything was still normal, as though I hadn't just pulled away from them completely. I stayed calm, though I could feel a certain satisfaction building inside me. Nothing much. Just wanted to know how things were going. There was a long pause on the other end. I could practically hear her trying to figure out how to spin the truth in a way that wouldn't make them look bad. "Well, he's been helping us out with some things, you know. He's been really busy, but he's been pitching in where he can." She was dodging the question. I could tell she wasn't being honest. Ethan wasn't helping them, at least not in the way they had hoped. He was probably doing the bare minimum, just enough to make it look like he cared. I replied, keeping my voice level. But isn't it a bit too much to expect him to cover everything, especially after all these years? Silence. Then, my dad's voice came through, rough and frustrated. "Callum, we didn't want it to be like this. We never meant to hurt you. We just thought you'd understand Ethan's in a tough spot. He's struggling. He needs time to get on his feet. We thought it would be easier on him." It was like déjà vu, hearing the same lines they'd used for years. They were still trying to justify it, still trying to make it sound like they had some noble reason for doing what they did. But I wasn't falling for it anymore. "I get it," I said, my voice cutting through their excuses. "Ethan's always been the struggling one, right? And I'm the one who always picks up the slack, who covers for his mistakes. Well, I'm done. He's your responsibility now." My mom's voice wavered. "Callum, don't say that. You're still our son. We didn't want to hurt you. You know we love you, right? We just didn't know how to handle it." I could almost hear the guilt creeping into her voice. I wasn't interested in her apologies anymore. I wasn't interested in the excuses they would continue to make. I was done. "I don't need your love if it's conditional," I said coldly. "If I'm not enough for you, then I don't want anything to do with you." There was a long, painful silence. And then my dad spoke, voice lower, almost pleading. "Please, Callum, we're sorry. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. We were just trying to help Ethan. But it was too late. The truth was out, and there was no going back now. My parents' financial situation was unraveling, and Ethan was nowhere to be found when it came time to face the consequences. My mom and dad were facing the reality of their actions, unable to rely on me, and seeing their golden boy turn his back on them when they needed him most. And as for me, I didn't feel sorry for them. Maybe that makes me sound harsh, but I had spent too many years living in their shadow, putting everyone else's needs before my own, only to be ignored when it mattered most. This was their mess now, and they were going to have to figure it out without me. So, yeah, that's where I am now. I cut them off. I'm done. No more bailouts, no more pretending like I don't see the way they've been treating me all these years. It was hard at first, but honestly, it feels like a weight has been lifted off my chest. I don't need to be anyone's safety net anymore, especially when they couldn't even be honest with me. But now I want to hear from you. What would you have done in my shoes? Do you think I was too harsh? Or did I have every right to finally stand up for myself? Let me know what you think in the comments. I'm genuinely curious to hear your thoughts on this one.